Is Joe Biden a moderate? Let's address that question now, because this goes to the heart of what the appeal of him as a president is supposed to be. He often talks about being a uniter. He talks about how he wants to unite the country, bring the country back together again. Okay. What evidence do we have of that? Other than the fact that he says it, which of course benefits him politically, so that doesn't make it clear at all that that's really his ultimate goal here. Is Joe Biden a uniter? Well, I think we should certainly look at this a little bit. Is he a moderate? Is he someone that will be able to tell the left, which has completely lost its mind, hey, guys, let's not push so far. Let's not be so crazy on this issue. Let's find a middle pathway. Bill Clinton gets a lot of credit historically from the media that slobbers all over him and loves him, despite the fact that he's a serial sexual assaulting, skirt chasing maniac. But Bill Clinton was always talked about as the guy who was triangulating. Well, the Republicans and Newt Gingrich took control of the House, and so to get things done, there was going to be some compromise. But I think also there was less of a polarization that had occurred at that period of time, or at least for the left, they were less crazy. They were a little bit closer to normal. Still crazy, but a little bit. You go back and watch even early episodes of The West Wing, as I've been doing recently. You see this. The libs, there was a kind of almost a quaint sanctimony with their, we just need campaign finance reform and banning guns, and everything will be better. Right, because those are critical issues of national importance. Ban assault rifles and do some nibbling around the edges of campaign finance reform, and America will be a much better place. These people are out of their minds. But Joe Biden was asked a question last night that I think illustrates where the Democrat Party really is now, just in terms of its ethos on the political scale, on the political spectrum. Left, right, where does it fall? Here he is asked about trans children. Play one.
The idea that an 8-year-old child or a 10-year-old child decides, I decided I want to be transgender. That's what I think I'd like to be. It'll make my life a lot easier. There should be zero discrimination.
What does that mean? Zero discrimination. First of all, does Joe Biden think that there are 8-year-old trans kids out there? Really? That's what he thinks? And that we should follow through on that? What does that mean exactly? When an 8-year-old says, if an 8-year-old boy says, I feel like I'm a girl, are we then supposed to change the 8-year-old's name? And, you've noticed this, as this plays out, there are some big warning signs that this is not what we're led to believe it is, or what the media wants us to believe. I think it was Brown University Journal of Medicine or Psychiatry or something like that. But it was out of Brown University, which is a very left-wing place. I mean, a stunningly left-wing monoculture over there. They have no balance whatsoever. I mean, a lot of the most smug, self-righteous, and haughty people you'll ever meet on the left went to Brown. It's the Ivy League school for straight-up communism. And big with celebrities, too. They love their kids to go there. So a lot of people buy their way into that school. They don't get grades. It's a very unimpressive place. But the Brown University published this study that showed that there was what effectively a trans, for children now we're talking about, psychological trans contagion, meaning that when one kid in a class or in a friend group who is at a very young age, formative age, decides that let's say he could be a she, he is a transgender individual, all of a sudden there's a huge spike in likelihood that somebody else in the class is going to decide that he or she is a trans individual. And then somebody else will decide. Now, if you look at this, I mean, just from a statistical standpoint, it's very unlikely that all of a sudden there's just a pocket of individuals who are found together at that age who are far more, who are far more densely trans than you would have in the broader population. That doesn't make any sense, right? Oh, no, we just happen to discover there are clusters of trans children, this is what this study, when it came out, as soon as it started to get some attention, because it proved that one is just an emotional, psychological component of this, and two, that among at least very young children, this is something that is almost like a fad. It catches on, right? People get a lot of attention. All of a sudden, everyone's, how can we accommodate you? When you're 8 years old, your brain is still forming. You're still figuring out who you are as a human being, very much so. You're a little kid. You're practically just a few years above being a baby. But that study, you know what happened? They retracted it, they buried it, and they pretended like it doesn't exist. Just like Twitter and Facebook do with the Hunter Biden story now. But they did everything they could to make sure that information was suppressed. These are policies that Democrats take where they think they're being really open-minded, and they think this is the supportive and kind thing to do to make 8, 9, 10-year-olds completely comfortable with this new trans identity that they're establishing, and it's becoming much more common now. They would say, well, it's because there's greater acceptance of it, and so people who are trans at a very young age now. Okay, well then let's have that debate and let's look at the data and let's really see, because the other stuff that they don't want to talk about is how old should you be when you start getting hormone therapy, which is going to do irreversible damage to the body. There are left-wing activists who will say you should effectively block puberty. It should start right away. This is really serious stuff. And the chief of transgender surgery at Johns Hopkins University Medical Center for decades, I can't remember the guy's name now off the top of my head, but he came out initially during this whole trans movement's early days saying people who have transgender surgery have very poor outcomes when it comes to happiness, long-term implications and effects. This is not something that the medical community should be embracing and doing, taking healthy organs, removing them, trying to replace them. This guy said it's very bad. I mean, he basically had just the entirety of the institutional left try to make him a monster for that. And now he's just been silenced. You never hear. I mean, she's probably even apologized. I should never have said that. This is what ends up happening. Because the left is a totalitarian mindset. The left doesn't believe in open debate and discussion. As we see from Facebook and Twitter again, they want to control what you can see, what you can think, what you're allowed to say. I was pleased that there had to be a bit of a walk back on sexual preference because they thought they had something. Oh my gosh, did you see ACB referred to sexual preference? That's terrible. Terrible. So bigoted. So anti-LGBTQ. That's what they were saying. That's what the left was claiming on this. And the issue they have then is all the clips that started circulating of Joe Biden, of other top Democrats. I'm sure we could find one with Barack Obama saying sexual preference. But there were Democrat senators who, when they saw the conversation on Twitter the day of, with these ACB hearings a couple of days ago, all of a sudden we're telling ACB that sexual preference is a term, I believe Crazy Maisie Hirono said, that anti-LGBTQ activists use. So the far-right anti-gay fringe, essentially, they're the only people who use a sexual preference. The media tried to back that up for a while, then they realized, yeah, pretty much everybody in America has referred to sexual preference on tape or on video. So this might be a tough one. So they're going to back away from this for right now. Doesn't mean they won't come back to it later. But they'll back away from it a little bit because it's too much of a stretch. They thought they had a useful weapon, but then they realized it was a double-edged sword. So not quite the coup they were hoping for. But Joe Biden as a moderate, what evidence is there for this? Do you know who else said that they weren't going to raise taxes on people who make less than $400,000? Barack Obama. And then they passed Obamacare, which meant that people who were paying for their own health care, had their own individual plans, were brought into a system where they overwhelmingly were forced to subsidize other people's plans who were getting Obamacare subsidies and get crappier coverage and pay more money for it. So that's just another version of a tax, right? And then, of course, there was the individual mandate, which was a tax, was a penalty. I don't know. Ask John Roberts. Notice that there's never some left-wing justice who is in the John Roberts role of dramatically disappointing those who believe in his or her judicial philosophy. There was never some time when all of a sudden, Sotomayor or Kagan are going with the conservative majority on an issue where everybody expected, that the left would stay together, wouldn't break ranks. But we'll talk more about the judge stuff in a little bit. Oh, but I do want to get to Biden and court packing, because that did come up last night. Let's jump to that one. I got a crash course recently in home title theft. You better pray this crime never happens to you, because it could wipe you out financially. It goes after your most valuable asset, which is your home. Here's what happens. The legal titles to all of our homes are online. They're in the cloud. They're stored in servers. The bad guys, cyber thieves, they hack your home's title, and then they use a quitclaim deed to kick you off, put themselves on, and start taking out loans against your home. You often won't find out about this until the bills arrive in the mail, or maybe even a foreclosure notice. You got to take action today. The usual identity theft services do not protect you. You have to create a virtual barrier around your home's title with Home Title Lock. Home Title Lock protects you and makes sure the bad guys can't just use your home's title to get a whole bunch of money that they're stealing from you. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. Then use code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. Again, all you have to do is go to HomeTitleLock.com, use that code RADIO, promo code RADIO, for 30 free days of protection. I'm not letting it go that Guthrie for NBC was doing the work of the DNC last night, acting like a total hack. I'm not just going to let this go. The questions that were asked included not only why don't you denounce white supremacy when he does, and he's done it a million times, and we're all sick of being asked the same question, but beyond that, she even got into, I think she asked him about QAnon? Play 13.
Just this week, you retweeted to your 87 million followers a conspiracy theory that Joe Biden orchestrated to have SEAL Team 6, the Navy SEAL Team 6, killed to cover up the fake death of bin Laden. Now, why would you send a lie like that to your followers? You retweeted
That was a retweet. That was an opinion of somebody, and that was a retweet. I'll put it out there. People can decide for themselves. I don't take a position.
You're not like someone's crazy uncle who can just retweet whatever.
That was a retweet. And I do a lot of retweets. And frankly, because the media is so fake and so corrupt, if I didn't have social media, I don't call it Twitter, I call it social media, I wouldn't be able to get the word out. And the word is false. And you know what the word is? The word is very simple. We're building our country stronger and better than it's ever been before. And that's what's happening, and everybody knows it.
Yeah, you know what's at the top of the minds of all the American people right now during a COVID pandemic and everything else? Did Trump retweet something? I didn't even see this. I don't even remember this. But look, lady, retweets do not equal endorsement. We all know that. All you have to do is go into the feeds of all these journalists, too. Look at the things that they're retweeting. They're constantly anti-Trump, constantly showing that they're Democrats. But they'll say, it's retweets do not equal endorsements. Well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. How about that one? But I'm sorry, it wasn't just he also was asked about QAnon. That was actually the Navy SEAL conspiracy. I got my conspiracy questions, but it's fine. Doesn't matter. Same idea. She asked about the QAnon thing, too. And Trump ended up saying something like, I don't like pedophilia. It's bad. So can we just all agree on that? She's like, oh, why would you go? The whole thing was a mess. It was a mess. And here we also got to the transition of power question. Another, these are all left-wing attacks with a question mark at the end. It's like, why are you the worst person ever? Question mark. That's what they do. Why are you the worst human being to ever say this thing? So here he is on the transition of power thing, 14.
They talk about the peaceful transfer, right? They spied on my campaign and they got caught, and they spied heavily on my campaign, and they tried to take down a duly elected sitting president, and then they talk about, will you accept a peaceful transfer? And the answer is yes, I will. But I want it to be an honest election, and so does everybody else. When I see thousands of ballots dumped in a garbage can and they happen to have my name on it, I'm not happy about that.
Okay, but just those are there is in fact fact, no evidence of widespread fraud. And you were sowing doubt about our democracy.
How can you say that? You do read newspapers.
I do.
You do watch the news.
Yes,
I know you read the news, but you watch it.
I do.
Because every day they're talking about ballots that are corrupt, that are fraudulent.
And millions that are being processed right now.
But you can win a race. Take a look at me. You can win a race by 1%.
But there's not fraud. Yeah, but he's also talking about the inherent errors in the system. When you add the mess ups to the actual cases of fraud that we do know exist, you don't need a lot to cause a big problem for the election. And notice that they went from 2 months ago, it was, oh my gosh, he's shutting down the post office, he's cheating, and Russian disinformation. They constantly talk about how Trump is undermining institution and faith in our elections. And then they do the very same thing and pretend like they weren't complaining about it themselves. It's impossible to argue with these people. It's like dealing with bratty children that won't listen to anything you say. They just want what they want, and if you don't give it to them, they're going to throw SpaghettiOs in your face. That's it. That's our journalist cadre. That's what we have to deal with every day. Oh, my gosh. She was the worst. I've always thought she was the worst. I mean, among these journal types, these people that are on like the Today Show and stuff, you know. Are you a journalist or are you like a game show host? Oh, really? You ask the question. Are you a journalist or a game show host? Are you supposed to be really smart or are you supposed to be likable? Oh, I'm just like the guy or the girl next door. Everyone likes me. Well, what is this? Are you in entertainment or are you in news and information? Are you opinion or... They don't have it. You know, it's just whatever works. Whatever works. Whatever gets the big checks to clear and unfortunately convinces the low information voter what to do. It's troubling, but we see all of this. Speaking of low information voters, Joy Behar still has ideas. She has ideas about things. She wants to give medical advice, to the president and everybody else around him. Play 22, please.
So we figured out how herd immunity would work. I'll tell you how it is. So you need to have 60% of the population have to get it in order for it to even be in the ballpark. And some doctors say it doesn't even work. So we have 330 million people in this country. So that means 198 million would have to get the virus. Okay, that's 60%. And out of that group, 2% would die. That would be almost 4 million people. So I say to Americans, are you willing to die for this man? Are you willing to die for this virus? And imagine the hospitals. We thought that they were overcrowded in April and May. Can you imagine if you have 198 people with the virus in this country? So this herd immunity is an outrageously stupid idea, and they should stop talking about it altogether. The only thing that's going to help us at this point is get rid of this guy and get a vaccination, period.
She's a moron. I really mean that. Vaccination creates herd immunity, you total imbecile. And now, I don't like to be mean. I mean, she's clearly a person with a low, mid 2-digit IQ. But listen, Behar, you take vaccinations to give herd immunity because not everybody gets the vaccination. And the vaccination doesn't even work for everybody. And herd immunity doesn't mean no one ever gets this, no one ever dies from this. Herd immunity, which is what you try to achieve with things like measles and chickenpox, means there's a high enough level of protection in the community that it is very limited spread when it comes up because it has very few hosts to jump to. It's not a panacea, but just remember that. She's telling you, we got to get rid of them. We got to herd immunity. No, herd immunity is the goal, even with a vaccine, you utter lib morons on The View. Read a book, not Harry Potter. Read an actual book. It's Harsanyi time, everybody. Our friend David Harsanyi from National Review, where he's a senior writer. He joins us now to talk about just all the things this week, because there's a lot of them. David, great to have you back.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with your feelings about the tech suppression of the Hunter Biden story, because it felt like all of a sudden now anybody on the right who had had even just some last thoughts, qualms, a little, it's really tough to hold those now. I mean, big tech, the bias is beyond a reasonable doubt.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Post stories were well within, collected and reported well within the normal bounds of ethical and moral report, the way reporters go about their business. The whole point of good reporting is to get your hands on information that powerful people don't want you to have. There's no, well, I shouldn't say there's no, but there's often no really clean way to do that, or some way that will make, be completely, I shouldn't say illegal, but, it's messy to get that kind of information. And I thought the Post was pretty forthcoming. Should note that I write for them occasionally, but I think they were pretty forthcoming in how they came about that information. Certainly, it's no different than getting ethically different than getting Trump's tax returns or the Pentagon Papers or any other major story of the last 100 years. So I think it was a clearly a biased effort to try to suppress information that is newsworthy, no matter where it came from. It was in the public record. So to me, it was an insane thing, that it was an insane and obviously biased, act of suppression.
Do you think that the Hunter Biden stuff that we've seen so far, does this, it feels to me like this is interesting to those of us who have known all along. It's quite clear that there was an influence peddling scheme. No one pays someone $50,000 a month for nothing. It doesn't, and they certainly don't pay Hunter Biden $50,000 a month. And I know people say it's more than that. It might have been 80, whatever, but tons of money. No one's doing that just because they feel like it. That doesn't exist. So we all knew there had to be a quid pro quo here, and now we've seen email evidence of the quid pro quo. But does it matter, Dave? And when I say it doesn't matter, yes, it matters ethically, and it's good that we know the story, and hat tip to the Post for breaking it. But are voters in Ohio, Michigan, Florida, Pennsylvania, etc., they going to care?
I don't know that they would care specifically about that story, though. I have to say, I think it's slightly more, or there are questions that go slightly beyond Hunter just doing, cashing in on his last name and the Obama administration. If there was a meeting, and I hope I'm understanding the story right, but if that email in the first story is true, and there was a meeting between a Ukrainian oil exec and the vice president of the United States, less than a year before he pressured the Ukrainians to fire a prosecutor that may have been looking into them. Now, I don't know that that's all true, but that seems like something people would want to...
That is the story right now.
Right, exactly. It would seem like something people would want to know more about. I'm not saying that Biden did anything wrong, but if Trump had done something or had been involved in that sort of scheme or was part of that, everyone would want to know. It would be a massive story. As my colleague Kevin Williamson said, if there were sex tapes found of Don Jr., hitting the crack pipe, it would be on the Jumbotron in Times Square. And that's just the truth. And
that's just
but
fact,
yet there's
right.
no curiosity about it.
So I want to ask you, and I'm trying to find a way to put this with the journos, because I see this repeated pattern where an intelligent, thoughtful person would come to a certain conclusion based on facts and evidence, and journalists do the opposite thing. When I say journalists, I mean about 90 to 95% of people who traffic in information and narrative creation for a living. And a perfect example of this is the Hillary Clinton foundation situation, right? And Bill and Hillary Clinton. I remember being on CNN and saying, guys, we're all going to know, right, that this is influence peddling, that Saudi Arabia doesn't care about giving money to the Clinton Global Initiative for women's rights around the world. They're paying off the Clinton crime family effectively for goodwill later on when Hillary becomes president. And we'll test my theory when we see the donations fall off a cliff. And they had to shut down the CGI right after she lost. I mean, it was like fell off. No more donations. No one cares. All of a sudden, charity doesn't matter anymore, right? We're not idiots. Hunter Biden, same kind of idea here. He's getting paid $50,000 a month by this company to be on a board. He has no credibility, no reason to be. We all understand why this is going on. Journalists don't seem able to make very basic, conclusions, to come to basic conclusions from the facts and evidence. Is this because they're pretending to be dumb, David? That this is effectively like they're feigning stupidity because they don't want to have to deal with what the facts and evidence are? Or do you think they're so brainwashed that they actually just can't see it?
I'm not sure. I would lean towards the latter. I mean, I've said this before, and I used to not be the type of person who thought that journalists went out of their way to work for the other for the liberal candidate or the Democrat. But it's clearly the case that they believe they have a mission to try to get Joe Biden elected. They're corrupt. It's corrupt. The way they cover it is corrupt. The questions they ask is corrupt, and the questions they don't ask are corrupt. And they did the same thing when Hillary engaged in criminal activity. I mean, it was clear to me that Comey gave her a pass that would not have been given to you when you worked CIA.
Correct.
And
100. By the way, David, 100% accurate. And I was telling people that all along. If I set up an email server and they found me with classified, I don't do what some people do, Hillary should, lock her up for 20 years. I would have had to take a criminal plea deal, been banned from having a clearance forever again, and probably gotten a year of probation or something. But it would have been a criminal charge. Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
And what would have happened if you then took, did some witness tampering and erased the trail of evidence that led to it? I think you would have been in even more trouble.
Then you would have gone to prison, by the way. Then I would have gone to prison. Absolutely.
Yeah. They got off. Comey let them get off. They blame him for her losing the election, but it was all her fault. He, in fact, tried his best to save her. And then they found that last laptop, and he had no choice but to go public with it because it would have been public anyway. But anyway, we don't want to rehash that. But they're doing the same thing again. Like right away, Bill Kristol and others are like, this is Russian disinformation. Everything they don't like is Russian disinformation. Well, listen, has anyone provided any evidence that those emails? Has anyone even said that the veracity of the emails aren't real, or that those aren't pictures of Hunter, or that Biden didn't meet with the Ukrainian oil exec? No, they haven't. And yet it was just. This is the thing. They banned the Trump URL from the Post, but yet they let the Daily Caller and the Washington Post give context to a story that no one's supposed to be reading in the first place. It's such a cover-up that I think that it's a bigger story than the actual Ukrainian whatever Biden was doing. The story, the big tech, and I'm not on board with removing liability protections for them, honestly. I don't know what to do, but I don't know that would help in the long run. But it's clear the big tech works for the Democratic Party as does big media. And now you're going to have big tech, big companies, big media, the university systems. Everyone's working for the same party. That I'm not saying it's fascism like Nazi Germany, but that looks a lot more like fascism than anything that they accuse, Donald Trump of doing. When you have every kind of industry working for one party, that's a one-party state. I'm sorry. I mean, I feel like that's where it's going. If they win this election, that's where we are.
And also, you're pointing out, we're speaking to David Harsanyi, everybody of National Review. Go to nationalreview.com for his latest writing. David, Russian disinformation. I mean, this is to call the Hunter Biden stuff Russian disinformation with, as you point out, zero evidence. It's just so craven and lazy. But people that are supposed to care about their reputations in this business do it. Like I would feel humiliated if I said something so stupid. But there's no consequences for any of this. How is that possible?
There's no consequences. You have the same people. By the way, all the journalists were essentially either quiet, meekly conforming, or cheering on Twitter and Facebook's suppression of a story by fellow journalists that was completely within, again, the ethical methods and standards that they themselves use. In fact, I would say that has a far higher standard used than they used on tons of Russia collusion stories that to this day go uncorrected. To this day, I can retweet. And journalists have turned on the First Amendment. It's a huge tragedy, I think. You know me for a long time. I'm not like the kind of guy who says, "Oh, you're a fascist," or I'm not the kind of guy who panics. I don't think every election is the most important election ever. I probably don't even think this one is. But what's going on now is unique and dangerous to free expression, and that concerns me far more than who wins the election or who doesn't. So I don't even know what question.
Why do you think it's gotten so much worse. You pointed out, I mean, David, I've known you now almost a decade, and you knew me right when I started in this and I left the CIA. It has gotten worse for sure. It's gotten more blatant, more obvious. And what am I talking about? The media as a herd moving in lockstep with the needs and desires of the Democrat Party. It has always been there, but now, I mean, if you saw the Savannah Guthrie town hall last night, she might as well have been throwing tomatoes at the president. It was ridiculous.
I wouldn't even mind that. I wouldn't even mind that so much if you did the same thing to Biden, right?
Well, right, but that's the point. They don't.
Yeah. I mean, the question she asked, someone summarized them, I forgot who on Twitter. They are idiotic. I mean, they had nothing to do with any. Maybe as a throwaway question, who do you owe money? Well, it's in the public record. Why won't you say, why won't you denounce white supremacy? The guy's done it like 20 times. So nothing about policy, nothing about foreign, affairs or anything like that. Nothing about nothing. And then you tune into the Biden stuff, and he's being asked, how do you feel, or whatever, whatever kind of softball questions they're asking.
What's it like to be in this?
Biden, not one.
Yeah, not one question on Hunter Biden.
And
it's
by
all,
the way, he's being interviewed by the former communications director of the Democratic President Clinton, right? No one, that doesn't bother anyone. A guy who gave money to the Clinton Foundation.
It just seems like this is all. So David, there is no good faith argument on the other side. I mean, the bias is everywhere. People keep asking me, what can be done about this, or how did we get to this point? And I start to worry where I feel like the left has just seized all the institutional power in the country. And the only reason that Republicans can still win some elections is because there's still a lot of Americans that have not been brainwashed into this way of thinking. But it's always this, the academia, Hollywood, the media, law schools, the whole legal profession now is really becoming a province of the left. What do we do?
I've been making this argument for a while now, and I just think that when there are still some wealthy conservatives out there, and there are many conservatives, period, out there, or not even conservatives, people who believe sort of in the traditional framework of American life, right? And you have to create your own institutions. You have to create your own platforms. You have to create your own TV station. You have to buy up properties and make them into something that's better than what they are now. Like, you need to, I think, start doing that instead of giving money to the same old politicians, the same old stupid, I don't want to point out anyone.
Think
but there
tanks,
are a lot of
think tanks.
A lot of think tanks. Some of them, incidentally, which I love, and people are thinking I'm pointing to a certain one. I'm not. I mean, I think that they do excellent work, and in fact, some of them actually do journalistic work that needs to be done. And we'll talk about the Heritage Foundation. Daily Signal is a really good site and does good journalism. But I think that more money needs to just be poured into the sort of popular cultural kind of sites that people read, and that's the only way. It's the only way to do this. They control the networks, other than Fox. The big ones, the news networks as well. I mean, I don't know how it's even their fact checkers, which are supposed to stand up for the truth, are just propagandists. The Washington Post is just basically a propagandist outlet. CNN is just ridiculous. I can't even watch it anymore.
It's actually funny though. I mean, you have to watch CNN with a glass of Jim Beam or something, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is pretty amusing. Actually, these people are out of their minds. They think they're still doing neutral journalism, my friend David. That's true. They still think that. They'll say that.
No, I know. I used to watch it and I'd laugh here or there because it's kind of so outrageous. But here's the thing. It honestly doesn't get me any new knowledge. I don't move forward. I just hear propaganda. That's how I feel. Like, I'm not a big cable news guy at all. So if I can watch C-SPAN with an event, I do, because I don't want to hear it. But even there the other day, I'm watching C-SPAN and there's like for Amy Coney Barrett stuff. And then there's a pause, and the guy goes on and he goes, reporter Kyle Griffin, MSNBC says, I'm like, are you kidding me? He's not a reporter. It's like
a left-wing propagandist. Yeah. Could you imagine if C-SPAN broke in? They're like, super serious journalist Buck Sexton had this thought on Twitter. Everybody, the libs would light things on fire.
I think you and I are less biased than some of the journalists that pretend to not be. Like, I'll write a column. I write columns critical of Donald Trump, they won't say anything critical of Biden ever.
Never. Yeah, I agree. All right, David, we got to leave it there, man. Have a great weekend. David Harsanyi at nationalreview.com. Follow this guy, read him. An honest conservative in the mix. Dave, thanks so much.
Thanks, man.
You know, the celebrities like to do this thing where they say they're going to leave the U.S. if their preferred candidate doesn't win. I got to tell you, I'm usually somebody who ignores this because they never do it, but there's one that I'm really hoping it's going to happen. Bruce Springsteen, the boss, is saying that if Trump wins, he is going to move to Australia, and that's just fine with me. That would be great. Australia can have him. That's right, I'm going to say it, the most overrated music act in my mind in my lifetime. Overrated and then some. I know some of you are going to get mad at me. I don't care. The boss is overrated. And then
I think all of New Jersey just groaned.
I know, they're all groaning at me. And then other parts of the country are going to get mad at me because, Stevie Nicks weighed in to say that if she hadn't aborted her child, you wouldn't have had Fleetwood Mac. And this has nothing I won't even get into the abortion comment she made, but this was just yesterday. Fleetwood Mac, I actually think the world would have been better off without Fleetwood Mac as a band because I think they're also overrated and horrible. That's right. I'm starting fights on Friday because I'm telling you the truth. No one really likes Fleetwood Mac. They're just told they're supposed to like Fleetwood Mac. Yeah. No one wants to listen to that.